Hello and welcome everybody to the TruthLab. This is episode number 12. I'm your host, Alex Landry, and today's special guest, his name is Greg Kunin. Greg Kunin is a really dear friend, and I'd consider him a mentor, so I'm really excited for this conversation today. How are you doing, Greg?
Alex, I'm doing well. It's good to be here.
Fantastic. Well, how about we get into your background? How about you share a little bit about your background and a little bit about, who you are?
You bet. Well, I'm the founder of Olaloa Products. We're a vitamin company that specializes in methylation support. I got very interested in nutrition and natural medicine when I was just a kid. I was very, very fortunate. My dad had an open mind. He's a classically trained medical doctor who, in the 1960s, he had been at New York Hospital, Cornell New York Hospital, and then he came out to do his postdoctoral fellowship in California in Palo Alto at Stanford. And in the mid 60s, my dad got very interested in human biochemistry and was very much influenced by Linus Pauling, who he worked with. And I was very fortunate. He started doing vitamin testing when I was about 5 years old. And so in 1967, he asked a very simple question. He was curious to know, is it possible that my patient is malnourished? And at the time, it was very interesting. My dad's a board certified psychiatrist and, like I say, classically trained. And he started checking psychiatric patients to see if they were malnourished. So he did what any scientist would do and any sensible doctor would do. He took some blood, sent it off to the lab, and lo and behold, he found out that his patients were malnourished. After you run the first 100 and they're 100% malnourished, it changes the dynamic and the way in which you interpret how you're going to practice medicine. And he realized he couldn't practice medicine the way he was taught. And then in about 1968, my dad got very interested in toxicity and started looking into whether or not his patients were malnourished. And not by malnourished, forgive me, toxic. And so he started doing hair tests and started checking out to see, if patients had lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, even fluoride. And much to his amazement, he found that people were carrying around a lot of poisons. So long story short, around this time, I started having some issues in school. I had behavioral issues and was having problems concentrating and was getting headaches. And I can tell you that my life changed once I started getting some vitamins into my system. And once I got the lead out, I found out that I had been lead poisoned as a kid. Back in the 1960s, I grew up, in the 60s, and there was a lot of lead. You'd walk out of your house in California, just start breathing from all the automobiles. You were being loaded with toxins. So I became very passionate about this at a very early age. Once I realized the connection between, diet and nutrient therapy and the impact it had on this.
Wow, that's fascinating. So could you summarize methylation and is it best?
Well, methylation
words or with like a graph or something or?
Well, I could show you stuff like this. I don't want to overwhelm everybody, and hopefully you can see it. This is on our website. The methylation cycle is really the cycle of life. It's an interesting story about methylation. Methylation isn't one thing. Some people hear about methylation when they start investigating gene testing, and they're testing for a half a dozen genes or so, a dozen genes. It doesn't really tell you very much. Ultimately, if you're going to take methylation seriously, you really need to understand the byproducts. This process it's the story of carbon. And while we're made of carbon, virtually all carbon compounds are toxic to the human body. You'd start off with, carbon dioxide, right? We expel carbon dioxide. That's one of the ways we get rid of acidity in the body. But carbon dioxide will kill you. certainly, coming out of the tailpipe, carbon monoxide. Well, carbon monoxide will definitely kill you. You start adding hydrogens into it, you get into methanes and ethanol. You put nitrogens on carbon, you get into cyanide. Obviously, it doesn't take too much cyanide to kill you. But the good carbon is a very specific carbon. It's known as methyl carbon. It's a carbon with 3 hydrogens on it. And what's special about it is that it moves from place to place in your body, and it reacts to vitamins on one side of the aisle, and on the other side, you got these enzymes. And through this movement of methyl carbon from place to place in the body, and these reactions, these are known as methyl transferase transactions, where the methyl group is transferred, you wind up with about 400 or 500 critical byproducts that control and regulate everything: heart function, circulation, digestion, detoxification, immunity, brain function, and energy regulation of all the cells of the body. And if you interfere with this system, just briefly, you can run into some problems. So a lot of people, like I say, they hear about methylation through some people talking about gene testing. One gene test in particular that people are hysterical about is called MTHFR, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. And it's important to understand you are more than your gene mutations. We're all mutants. And really the question is, do you have a mutation here or there? Really the question is, well, how is your body adapting to those mutations? And the only way to really determine that is to check these byproducts that you can see here on the map. Your B vitamins, your B12, your B6, your folate, your CoQ10. What's going on with the big ones, homocysteine and methionine? What's that balance? At the center of the chart, you can see this dynamic that homocysteine converts when it's working properly, when the system is methylating properly, homocysteine is converted back into methionine. Methionine is so important that your body has a means to be able to restore it. And that's really the role of methylfolate, which is part of the whole MTHFR. So a lot of people, I get calls all the time, people are hysterical. They find out that they're MTHFR mutated and they think that, their life has ended, when in fact, having the mutation for many people is protective. So in a nutshell, this is really, when you look at methylation, what you're really looking at are 2 things: the adaptive mechanism of the human body and balance. That's the key to understanding methylation: balance. And unfortunately, a lot of people get confused and they wind up throwing a huge amount of methyl into the equation. Excess methylfolate, excess methyl B12, and they wind up not feeling very good. And that's because they've disrupted the orderly balance of methylation. So I hope that answers your question. I try not to get too overly complicated about it because it can overwhelm people.
I can see why. At least I pulled up that graph. So when did you form the X-Men Academy, Greg?
Well, it's very interesting that the progression that my dad had. So in 1967, he starts doing vitamin testing. In 1968, he starts doing toxic analysis. So my dad is considered the founder of orthomolecular medicine, identifying those essential molecules that control and regulate our body function. But it was really in the 80s, I think, he had his big leap forward. And that's when he started moving into an understanding of, well, what is nutrition? Nutrition is circulation. It's not just what you put in your mouth. It's not just what you get into your stomach. It's what you can deliver to the cells. And let's face it, the greatest risk that people have, in terms of the number one killers here are, heart disease, stroke, and cancer. So my dad had an epiphany. Nutrition is circulation. Circulation is nutrition. What blocks that circulation? Clotting factors. You know, a lot of people think, well, I'm fine. I'm not having a heart attack. I'm not having a stroke. What's fascinating is about 2/3 of the population suffers from low blood flow due to overactive clotting activity, hypercoagulation. And one of the big ones is on the center of that methylation diagram, homocysteine. And so my dad started checking for clotting factors. There are about a dozen major clotting factors, but the big three that my dad routinely would check for: homocysteine, fibrinogen, and lipoprotein A. A number of cardiologists these days, and it's lipoprotein small a. A number of cardiologists these days are starting to look into that. In particular, they're starting to see a connection between vascular disease and Alzheimer's due to excessive LPA. So my dad started checking his patients, and it was mind blowing. It was very simple. If you took all of our patients, put them on a spreadsheet, those with the most clotting activity at the top of the list, and those with normal blood viscosity at the bottom, everyone at the top of the list had they shared one thing in common. These people are all disabled, chronically ill, suffering from premature aging, chronic inflammation. I mean, think about it. If you lower blood flow, we're not talking about stopping blood flow. We're not talking a full occlusion, just lowering blood flow. What you're in essence doing is you're putting yourself into a state of ischemia, a low blood flow state, and you're suffocating your cells. Well, inflammation gets worse. You know, it's hard to heal damage when you're struggling to just deliver the nutrients to the cells, because these transactions in our blood chemistry have to happen in a timely manner. When that cell over here is saying, I need B12, feed me, you've got a limited opportunity to get the vitamin B12 to that cell. And if you don't do it in a timely manner, the cell activity stops and the cell dies. So a lot of people are surprised to learn that they suffer from this overactive clotting activity. And it really opened up a great understanding for my dad's work, and understanding why some people were not necessarily responding just to vitamin therapy. It was almost like there was a roadblock there. This really answered a lot of questions. So my dad developed a system, an orthomolecular medicine, that was based on the analysis of three major areas: nutrition, pollution, and stress. And when we're talking stress, we're talking about blood coagulation stress, hormonal stress, and then, of course, methylation, genomics. And you put all that information together, and you've got a much more clear understanding of your biochemical individuality. And what we're really trying to do is identify what your vulnerabilities are. You know, unfortunately, I mean, I'm not completely anti-conventional medicine, but it's limited in terms of the information you're going to get, and there's a lot that falls through the cracks. And that's where the orthomolecular approach comes in, and certainly that's where Ololoa comes in. We've made it very easy for people to be able to get a rather significant nutrient support in a delicious drink that's providing 36 vitamins, minerals, amino acids, digestives, electrolytes, osmolytes, a gram dose each of vitamin C, betaine, trimethylglycine, and glycine, and even our vitamin B12. A lot of people don't understand the differences between the different forms of vitamin B12. Again, people hear about methyl, and they start throwing methyl B12 and methylfolate at the problem. Methyl B12 is designed to be made intracellularly. And the form of vitamin B12 that preferentially enters the cell is hydroxycobalamin. Once it's in the cell, hydroxycobalamin readily converts to methyl and adenosine. Those are the two active forms of B12, and they're made on demand, as needed, regulated by your individual biochemistry. And because I should say, you know, one of the key components of methylation, it's not just about putting methyl in and having access to those methyl groups. It's also about getting excess methyl out. And that's a key core component. I don't know of any other vitamin company that's done that in a single product. And that gamma glycine enables what's known as GNMT to be able to produce sarcosine to expel the excess methyl. Very important part of the puzzle. So what I've tried to do is I wanted to make it a pleasure and try and make it easy. You know, the vitamin industry is very much like, well, it's controlled by a lot of multinational companies. And the last thing they want to do is load the product with a lot of active ingredients. In fact, when I first started Ololoa, I would routinely hear from people in the industry and they'd say, you know, your product is way too healthy. You know, you need to break it up. The vitamin industry loves people to go and have 20 different items and to take all these pills. You know, it's just too much for people. And when I would talk to our patients in my dad's medical practice, you know, most of the people that were coming to see us were suffering from vascular disease, cancer, I mean, real illness. And there are times when people just say, enough is enough. I just can't do it. I can't take all these pills. So I wanted to do something that would make it a little easier for people. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, I've taken hundreds and hundreds. Love it. Well, Greg, I mean, hearing all of that, I can't help but think when you talk about a spreadsheet of your father's patients, what did he notice with athletes?
Well, you know, athletes are kind of an interesting group because, you know, they don't really think nutrition as a major component. When they're thinking nutrition, a lot of these guys are thinking protein powders, protein. Excessive protein, obviously, is, you know, again, balance of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates is absolutely essential. A lot of these guys are superhuman. They will perform even while they're injured. And oftentimes, I mean, you know, bodybuilders, for example, they'll go into renal failure. They'll be so destructive to their bodies. Football players will be wiped out. They'll be doing cortisone injections and basically Band-Aid approach to the point where, you know, they can't heal. So unfortunately, it's a very small group of athletes that I've found that recognize the importance of nutrient support. And it's important for the general public to understand this. The greater the demands are that you put on your body physically, the greater the need for nutritional support. A lot of people are very confused about, especially when they read the backs of labels and they see, you know, percentages and supplement facts. And those numbers confuse people. It used to be when you had the information related to nutrient content of these types of things, they had a different nomenclature. When they started off, it was known as the MDR, the minimum daily requirement. And today we're talking about the RDA, the RDI, you know, recommended daily intake. The best way to understand this is that you can see it as two different things. I had a conversation, Linus Pauling, the Nobel Prize winner, and my dad, they were having an interview together. And I was talking to Linus after the interview, and we were talking about the problem of drug therapy, foreign substances, toxic molecular substances that are not normally found in the human body. And they're trying to identify what is the maximum amount of a drug that they can give you without killing you. And on the other side of the spectrum, the orthomolecules, the vitamins, the minerals, they try to identify what's the least amount of a essential nutrient that we can give you to keep you alive. And that is where a lot of people get confused and they think, oh, well, I'm at 100%. I'm reading here 100%. And they don't understand that these are not the optimum levels. And what's amazing to me is I'll get into conversations with the general public or even with doctors, and they'll tell me you don't need any supplements. You don't need extra vitamins. And I go, really? I go, have you ever checked any of your patients? Have you ever checked yourself to find out what your micronutrient levels are? I've never had anybody who said that to me who has ever once checked out just to get a perspective. How am I doing? In my dad's book, Mega Nutrition, he called this the how did he refer to it? It was very funny. He referred to it as basically the American death sentence, the dietary death sentence, believing that the average American diet is adequate in nutrients. And the fact is, the food is pre-picked, artificially colored, loaded with toxins. I mean, food has changed in the last 50 years. Just getting vitamin B12 out of meat has become very, very difficult. And you have to go out of your way to get good food. Mass production, of food and agriculture has changed the dynamic of what we're actually putting in our mouths. Dealing with livestock, if you take a look at these large commercial ranches, I mean, the cattle are being fed a bad diet, and they're getting loaded with hormones and antibiotics. It's awful. So if you want to get good food, you got to go out of your way. You got to find ranchers and farmers. Fortunately for us in Northern California, I have direct access, at the farm level, and at the ranch, so I can actually get these things. But just finding good eggs is a struggle. Getting range animals that are eating a diverse diet, that are getting like chickens that are getting those worms and eating all these different things. You can tell a lot when you see the yolks. Mm-hmm. And then of course wherever you go, it seems like there's a toxic threat. It used to be in the 1950s, better living through chemistry. There was poison everywhere, but in many respects, we've got a lot of poison today.
Yeah, well, going back to how our conversation started with your father basically having these epiphanies about malnutrition and then toxicity, and basically you can't really provide recommendations or solutions. I mean, other than exercise more, eat less, right? But I mean, overall, to focus on improving nutrition, while reducing, toxicity, which I guess gets into detoxing, as
well. Certainly. I mean, vitamin C alone, the number of people who have been saved just with vitamin C and who have been afflicted with lead poisoning is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's what was very telltale for me, as I say, my dad was a board certified psychiatrist, and in the 60s was, his whole practice started to change because he would take schizophrenics, and, a few months later, they were different people. They'd walk out of a mental hospital. By, the 1970s, my dad really had, his whole practice had changed. He had moved primarily from psychiatry into general practice. And certainly by the 80s, his major focus was on vascular disease, cancer, and autism. And it's very powerful when you see these transformations of these people. My dad was responsible for a number of discoveries in nutrition science, did a great deal of work with niacin and blocking the niacin flush and the whole concept of prostaglandin activity in niacin. One of the most remarkable things was tardive dyskinesia. I don't know if you're familiar with tardive dyskinesia, but this is a drug-induced disease where antipsychotic drugs become so toxic that psychiatric patients lose their control. They have dyskinetic movements. They start shaking. They lose control of their ability to swallow. And my dad discovered manganese therapy in treating these patients with remarkable success. And so to see as a kid, to see somebody who was having major bouts of psychiatric disorders and multiple hospitalizations and seeing many, many doctors, and within a matter of just a few short months, these people are like different people. Today, running $1 million companies is absolutely amazing. So, and of course, personally going through it. I mean, I've suffered, for example, early on headaches. I was very fortunate. I was very carbohydrate sensitive. And my dad had been doing work in the 1950s and developed a program known as the orthocarbohydrate diet, the listen to your body diet. It's on our website under resources. You can see it there, but it trains people to understand the relationship that they have with fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. And I learned very early on I couldn't drink soft drinks. I couldn't do a lot of refined sugars, and I would get goofy in the head. I get headaches, and I couldn't think straight. So I did better on a higher protein, high fat diet, and started respecting food. I don't eat packaged foods per se. We try and do everything we can to get high quality, good food and minimize empty calories. I mean, as best I can. But it's very powerful when you identify. You can point. You take some blood and you can find out, hey, this guy's malnourished, or he's toxic. And some people have a bum deal. They've got some genetic hurdles that make them a little bit more vulnerable. They don't process, for example, what are the big ones? Homocysteine. It's fascinating. Chambers and McGregor did their original studies, and they fed their subjects the equivalent, the same amount of methionine in 2 steaks. They had them come back 4 hours later as homocysteine peaked. And what they found was the average healthy male, these were young college kids, the average healthy male in the group had a reduction of blood flow by Doppler technique, 86% drop in blood flow. Now, obviously, most people are not going to go out and eat 2 steaks. The important thing is, you could see reduction of blood flow. And you recognize the fact that there are a lot of people who are suffering from this on a regular basis, where they've got low blood flow. They don't even know it. And homocysteine is typically controlled with vitamin B6, B12, and folate. And for a lot of people, for that system to work, at a minimum, it requires 3 enzymes, an ideal diet, and a lot of luck from start to finish. And that's where betaine is a magic ingredient in our product. We've got this is the equivalent of 3 pounds of beets in one of these packets. That 1,000 milligrams of betaine and glycine, betaine will lower homocysteine, even when B12 and folate fail. And so I always tell people, you want to do a simple methylation test and avoid the blood test, take an Olaloa, see how you feel. It's interesting. Mike Adams wrote about us in one of his books, and he's talked to me many times about experiences he's had where people all of a sudden changed. They were at a low, and 30 minutes, 40 minutes later, after one Olaloa, they felt like different people. So it's been very interesting to see how people react. In fact, most of the people who take our product have absolutely no idea the level of science that's involved with it. They can't talk to you about methylation at all, but they recognize that when they take the product, they feel good.
Yeah, I can't, Greg, but think about all the research, in a perfect world. Because even for myself, at one point when I was taking a lot of Olaloa, I was running a lot.
Yeah,
because I look at things like, even now, like, oh, can I reduce gray, or like, different studies where, like, let's say you have, 20 people that are really trying to improve their pace and running. 10 people are taking Olaloa, 10 people are. You get what I'm saying? But it's
certainly. Well, certainly in the realm of biochemical study, things. I mean, there are a host of ingredients. I mean, vitamins. The interesting thing about vitamins is that they really do like to work together. In a synergistic way. Certainly, studies have been done with betaine as something that enhances performance. On the hydration side, for example, electrolytes. You go into electrolyte stress very rapidly, and sodium. It's a small molecule. It leaves the cell. It pulls fluid out. The cell basically folds on itself, collapses, and you get dehydrated and fatigued. What's interesting about methylation is that it's responsible for the production of creatine, carnitine, CoQ10, calmodulin, SAMe. These are all your muscle and cellular energy regulators. What's interesting is that osmolytes in many respects are actually more powerful than electrolytes in terms of the fact that they maintain the osmotic pressure of the cell in and out. So what in a nutshell, your cell life is extended. You don't go through your hydration as quickly. In the farming world, they use these osmolytes to treat plants to be able to make them drought resistant. Well, to an extent, that's what happens in the human body. So that's one piece of the puzzle. On the muscle energy regulating side, that's another piece of the puzzle. And then, of course, you got to remember, the amazing thing about the body is that we're basically a furnace. And you get into working out and running, you got free radicals occurring. You've got an oxidative event that's taking place. Antioxidant support is essential for that. And then, of course, there's recovery as well. It's very difficult to recover if you don't have the building blocks there to be able to recover. So it's a very thoughtful product. And like I say, I mean, a lot of this is pure selfishness. I recognize that to do this in pill form, you had to take a lot of pills. My son was just a couple of years old when we started looking into this. We were originally going to do this as a whole line of products, 5 or 6 different products. You'd be taking a lot of pills. And I looked over at my 2-year-old and I realized, there's got to be a better way. And up until the time I came along, really the only thing that was out there was vitamin C and sugar. And I really wanted to do something a little bit more than that. And of course, the fact that we were doing a great deal of work in the realm of methylation and saw it as such a universal problem. All that knowledge of my dad's work is what brought this all together. So it's really been a labor of love.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I mean, I've always had interest in the product, and maybe we'll talk offline because I mean, I just see the possibilities. I mean, I'm sure you've attempted to do some campaign targeting college sports teams or professional sports teams or even the military. I mean, to get
we've had a lot of experience working with soldiers. I'm very proud of the fact that we've had a number of soldiers who have told us that this product saved their life on a number of different levels. And it's interesting. I mean, this gets into a whole nother level of conversation about, when people are healthier and free of the burden of being, a prisoner to their health. There are a lot of potential for civilization, I believe.
Yeah. Well, hey, I think that's a good segue because I love hearing about all of this, but we are in the TruthLab, so obviously there is a big lab component, to your formulation of these products and obviously the science behind it and nutrition in general. But here, let's get into truth, Greg. So how would you, what does truth look like to you, and how would you describe your truth-seeking journey?
Well, it's interesting. You probably have heard that saying, it's not the knocks in life, but how you roll with the punches. And I had a crossroads in my life, which really made me who I am today. I was very, very fortunate. My dad was my best friend, and I was totally enthralled by his work. But my dad was also a philosopher. And something that he trained all of his patients in was an understanding of the inner smile. And about happiness and life being a choice. I graduated high school in 1980. And about 3 weeks after I graduated, my 8.5-year-old brother was at the Burlingame Country Club, and his best friend, who was 9 at the time, picked up a golf club and hit my brother in the base of the neck and killed my brother. That was a tough moment in my life. And, even now, I mean, my relationship with my brother all these years later is still going on. I mean, I'm feeling him right now. and I'm able to, these are tears of joy. I'm able to smile. I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be able to have that and to have that connection. And I recognized I had a choice in life. I was at a crossroads. I was, I was 17 at the time, and this was my only sibling. And I had a real tough time. The idea that God could do this,
Mm-hmm.
hard for me to face that. And I was very fortunate, because my dad had instilled in me the power of the inner smile. And it's important to recognize that regardless of what challenge you're going through in life, these are all lessons. And it's important to understand what the lesson is and how you can, move forward. I don't really prescribe to any particular religion per se. I'm more of if someone had to classify me, in some respects, I'm a cross between a Buddhist and a Taoist. Buddhism, life is suffering, and Taoism, life is pleasure. And I think you got to take one with the other. And so it's important for me to understand that, we're all here for each other. And every day is the greatest. I live my life with an understanding. I made a decision that day, June 22nd, 1980, that I was going to live every day. Every day was going to be the greatest day of my life.
Was that the day your brother passed?
Yeah.
But it was an immediate response?
It was really weird. It's the only time in my life I've ever felt alone. My parents were away at an event. It was a big celebration for my dad's book, Mega Nutrition. They were up in Napa at a big estate there at one of our friends' places. And they're having a big party, and it was just a celebration of this wonderful event that my dad's book had just was coming out. And I got the phone call and had to leave San Francisco and go down to the peninsula where my brother was. And I had to wait for my parents. And it was the first time in my life I felt I really had no control over this situation.
Yeah.
And I got my parents home, and I had, certainly one of the most difficult things was to tell my mother that her son was gone. And it was weird. My son was so-called my brother was brain dead, and had quite a big blood clot in the brain, and there was brain swelling. They did the typical, burr holes. But your brain plays tricks on you. He was there. His heart was still going. It's quite a, it can screw with your head. And I got into the car when we got home, and I realized I had to go see my girlfriend at the time. I got in the car, and I was in San Francisco, and I've always had a thing about music. I love music, and I have a bad habit of playing my music a little too loud. And it was important that moment. I needed to be in the car with my music, and Tom Petty was playing. And I was able to just stop for a moment and look back and just accept the fact that, this was a terrible thing. You have to recognize, the hurt. At the same time, I realized, life was going to go on, and that I had to make a choice right then and there. It was tough. We're animals. So I would have to say, everybody recognizes that, this event was beyond my control, and my response, yes, it was guided by my dad's belief in the inner smile, and that, I would be able to carry on. But I would have to say that there was a higher force that channeled through me to allow that to happen. Mm-hmm. Something way beyond me and the animal. you know. And so I made a conscious effort of that, you know.
Did you feel right away like your brother was? I mean, obviously, we say words like heaven, but that might, you know,
You
be
know,
based
uh,
or.
my brother was a really unusual kid. You know, and I take a little credit for that because I was the ultimate big brother, and my feeling was that there's something, you know, it's beyond human comprehension. There's something bigger and more than us. Some people refer to that as God, you know, but there's an energy that's out there that I recognize as bigger than me, and I believe that my brother is always with me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and my relationship with him changed. You know, I don't have him in 3D here with me, per se, but I experience him in many different ways.
Probably every day, right? I mean,
Absolutely, you know, and that's why, you know, I would say, you know, that's I would say if you had to put it into words, that's an acknowledgement of God right there.
mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to use that term.
Yeah.
But I've been very fortunate. I mean, I feel very blessed to have that connection and to share that with the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we tend to be crisis driven. A lot of people, you know, they get worked up at the slightest thing, and I think understanding the inner smile can be very empowering and calming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we don't really know till we have a situation like what you went through, you know, of losing
Well,
where then, you know, you're having to really apply the insight that your father shared with you, you know, and I'm sure you never thought you would lose your brother. So,
it wasn't even in the realm of possibility. I will tell you, it's interesting. It's one of those things about truths in life. You know, I say that orthomolecular and the understanding of biochemistry is one of those truths that we can experience in life. Certainly, the inner smile has been one for me. I'll tell you another area which really was very empowering to me was when I started to get into Tai Chi
how
and moving meditation was a very powerful effect in terms of getting centered
when
and,
into
and
that?
well, you know, it's interesting. I got into martial arts when I was 8.
Okay.
Did traditional Kempo and Shotokan when I was a kid, Wing Chun when I got a little older, very collision oriented. Um, and I was very fortunate. After my son was born in '94, I started to see, you know, it's interesting. In the Tai Chi world, there's a famous saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I was fortunate. I was at the park and I started to see a group of guys who were doing Yang style Tai Chi at the time. And I befriended one of them and was very curious and had an open mind. Because when it comes to Tai Chi, you have to be brutally honest with yourself. You know, it's and to really understand Tai Chi, you have to understand the push and the pull, and understand that every one of those movements is a martial movement. These guys I met were a very interesting, sophisticated group of fighters. A lot of guys from Wing Chun and Screama and
Yeah.
very capable fighters. And I was just really enthralled by what they were doing. And of course, there are other aspects to it beyond the martial side of it, especially the moving meditation, and really going back to your roots. You know, it's interesting. You know, as we become very muscle centric after about age 3. You know, we're like jelly. You push on a 3-year-old and they just go with the flow. When you get into Tai Chi, you become a revolving door, and you lead your opponent into emptiness. And when you slow things down, you start to really become in tune with your body. And we become very, once we start getting into our muscles, we kind of separate further and further, especially guys, we separate from our center. And so what I found, what's fascinating is that you start to become aware of external forces and other pressures and other stimuli that oftentimes you took for granted and didn't even know was there right in front of you. And so you start to see a more complete picture of the world, really, when you get into Tai Chi. It's an amazing phenomenon as you go deeper and deeper. And it's fascinating because, it's like peeling an onion, but it never ends. It's like climbing a mountain. And as the more deeper you get into it, the mountain keeps growing.
The other mountaintops,
Well, it's a never-ending learning process.
What about Aikido?
I like Aikido. Aikido is more in line, I think, with the principles of Tai Chi. At the end of the movements in Aikido, they tend to have a forceful movement. What's interesting when you start to go hands-on with someone who's really skilled in Tai Chi is you can never really grab their center. And the better as you get more into it, you realize that that's a very powerful ability to have.
Here, excuse me for 1 second.
Yeah, no worries.
My door. I'll literally be super.
Yeah, okay, no worries. It's okay. I'm here. Anyone still watching? This is one of our products. Ololoa Energy replaces about a dozen vitamin pills, gram doses of betaine, glycine, and vitamin C. If you're looking for mineral support, we have a separate mineral component, 30 nutrients. Ololoa Repair provides glucosamine, carnitine, taurine, ginger, gotu kola, vanadium, inositol, vitamin K, calcium pyruvate. I broke my knee 3 times, and Repair was actually made because of my broken knee. So it's a great complementary product to the multivitamin. And we have different flavors of the multi. We also have a hydration, a lighter version of our multivitamin that does not contain fat-soluble vitamins, completely vegan formula, 2/3 less sugar than Emergency, about 10 more nutrients, roughly 20 more ingredients than Liquid IV, and of course a lot less sugar, but it's providing that critical osmolytic support as well. So it's a very interesting line of products. And then we have a sublingual vitamin B12 lozenge with active folate. So go to our website and you'll learn a lot more about our products. And if you ever have any questions, call us or send us an email. I'm here to help you.
Who are you talking to, Greg?
Oh, I'm talking to whoever's listening. I just figured I would talk about the line a little bit.
The FedEx guy he just ran over my mailbox.
Oh my God, you're kidding.
No.
No other damage, I hope.
Yeah, no other damage. I mean,
okay.
Respectful because it's like I'm, interviewing you, and I'm not sure if I'll edit this out or what.
Well, you can take a look afterwards, and you can decide that.
Yeah, but
I filled in the gap a little bit.
Yeah, it was a good opportunity for me to just, be 100% inner smile, right? So to be
it beats the alternative.
You did what?
I used to be very reactionary, and I've learned, when people are having troubles and they want to get some kind of a reaction out of you, if you're able to control yourself that way, it's very empowering.
Yeah. Well, it's nice because if I didn't answer the door, I wouldn't know. I would just see my mailbox, and be like some jerk just ran it over, and just another day, And well, Greg, I think I was wanting to share a little bit about Aikido because I think we
Okay.
about how I've done a decent amount of Wing Chun. I love Wing Chun. Foster Gamble, who is in California as well. He's all about Aikido, but he applies it to life and how when we have that sense of unity with others, like even an enemy, and like the idea of like even an enemy not completely being violent towards them,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I don't want to, get on a tangent, but the same thing like you and I have talked about off air about, different methods of self-defense that would be non-lethal, and stuff like that too, to kind of sometimes it's pretty interesting, So I mean, have you ever done Aikido or
I've been around it. There are many, many similarities in terms of overall movement. Tai Chi is, I mean, Wing Chun is close, throwing punches, from inside. And understanding those 45-degree angles is critical, which was very helpful for me. Tai Chi is, really close in. I mean, you're talking kissing distance, and of course, what I've found is that it gives you greater control in terms of, it's like having a dimming switch. A lot of guys who are very capable fighters are, it's either on or it's off, and no in between. Certainly, these arts, I think, especially in terms of joint manipulation, give you greater flexibility in terms of how much volume you want to rise to, and
yeah, interesting.
it's very difficult when you can't grab someone's center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
Well,
I'm a big fan. You know, it just depends on what your situation is.
yeah.
You know,
I
some
Aikido because sometimes the context without going too far out there when we think about a healthy society and the idea of the non-aggression principle and like how to even apply that in true self-defense and the idea of like just somebody's trying to hurt us but we just redirect it but then we don't try to hurt them, we just try to like stop them.
well, certainly I have found and experienced early on, you'll always meet somebody who's bigger and stronger than you. And a lot of guys would come out, when I had an 18-inch neck and, would come out as a kid, would come out of class. I mean, you're like this all the time and, you're holding on to that. It's very, very self-destructive, and it messes with you up here. The best fighters that I know are very relaxed,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't walk around with all that clench, and their dantian is very full. They're very they just exude energy, and they will invite you in, which is very similar in the Aikido principle. So I'm a big fan, because I think it also it's very healthy for you. When you're walking around clenched and on and stressed all the time, that is very harsh on the body. And you wind up getting hurt.
Yeah.
You get stiff, and it's negative on the psyche.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I external power guys oftentimes can just be very much like that. I'm much more of a believer now in my 60s of being aware of internal power and building that energy, and not being self-destructive. I was very much about collision as a youngster.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, where could we take this? I like in the TruthLab, I think you did a good job explaining your truth-seeking journey. Have you spent much time pondering, like maybe what you were doing before you were born? I mean,
You know, uh, certainly, the mind does go there, but I don't have the data. I'm very much data driven, and at the same time, I want to believe that it's interesting. My dad and Linus Pauling were working on a book towards the end of Linus's life, because Linus had an amazing journey, two-time Nobel Prize winner. Our understanding of the chemical bond is all based on his work. All of his work on the X-ray diffraction studies of the elements. He got the Nobel Peace Prize. He almost got a third Nobel Prize, for DNA. And in large measure, Crick and Watson actually received the Nobel Prize in large measure because of Linus Pauling's work and the theory that he expressed, which he knew was wrong, but he gave it to science in the hopes that it would lead to this discovery. But my dad was talking to Linus one day about the afterlife. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating. Scientists have a very difficult time with this, and Linus's response to my dad was, don't be trite. We're here, we're gone, and that's it. And I would like to believe that there is something beyond this. Mm-hmm. It's whether you follow a prescribed religion or not. It's the belief that the energy once created continues to flow is comforting to me. You got another FedEx driver driving into the house?
Oh, he's back again. He's back at the crime scene. It's so funny.
It's good. It makes this unforgettable.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, it's funny though, Greg, because I hear what you're saying, but then it's kind of like, then what is our purpose here? And I understand from what you said, I agree about, choosing to be happy, choosing to help, those around us. But then sometimes there's some of those bigger questions of like, are we living our purpose here?
Well,
we don't have data per se for the afterlife. Well, don't we have a lot of data about whatever's going on?
Well, certainly, I think it's safe to say that there are a lot of people who also have unrealized potential that they never actually figure that all out. And the journey, as much as we want to control it, God just laughs.
I've heard that too, that whole saying, man plans and, God.
Yeah.
But then I also sometimes reflect on like, life is made up of time. So then this gets into like time management or, how can we do more with less time and like efficiency. And, there are times, I've experienced it where planning can save time, but to try to balance things, to try to, plan in some type of relationship with like how things can happen better than we could plan,
Well, what's real? I'll tell you, my brother was 5 years old and we shared a room together. And one night we were about to go to bed and he says to me, "We are living dreams." Oh. I got to tell you, I was 14 years old and my 5-year-old brother is telling me this. Well, that freaked me out a little bit.
Any context for it? He just randomly,
I wish I could. I wish I had all the answers. I just get the sense that he was intuitive to a point where he knew certain things that I have yet to learn.
Yeah.
So all we can do, I mean, one day my dad was in the car and we were driving, and my dad said, "You know what the meaning of life is?" He was talking to my mother, and my brother was asleep. We thought he was asleep in the back of the car, and he pops up and he goes, "The meaning of life is living." And my dad had this idea that he was just about to express to my mom, that the meaning and the meaning of death is infinity. And so it was very interesting. My brother was just a very unusual kid, and I love the role of being a big brother.
Yeah. Well, you're the big Kahuna.
But I mean, I just think that obviously we don't have all the answers, and it's naive to think that we do have all the answers.
Yeah, sometimes we find truth by determining what's not true, in my opinion.
Yeah, if we can actually find that. Of course, sometimes the truth changes.
You got to go where it goes, right?
It's very interesting to me today that there are some people who are very, very righteous, especially when it comes to the planet right now, and some of the, I keep on hearing George Carlin in the back of my head, the idea we're going to save the planet. The planet's fine. It's the people.
Yeah.
Planet's going to be fine. It's going to be around a long time after we're gone. Mm-hmm. As George would say, it's going to shake us off like a bad case of fleas. But I am very curious, I mean, let's face it, some interesting things seem to be happening right now, especially as we start to have our consciousness raised with maybe what's going on with the universe, mm-hmm. and potential visitors. I mean, I'm really curious what we'll learn next.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, it's interesting because sometimes the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's why it's like, are we creating it, or is there something else creating it? Or like, where are we going?
I'm trying to be very positive right now because I mean, I don't want to sound too conspiratorial, but I've grown up in a world where my dad's work seemed to threaten a lot of conventional minds, and there's been a war against natural healing and vitamins since my earliest memory. And this battle we've been fighting for a long time. As you know, I'm the vice chairman of the National Health Federation, and I'm very hopeful that we've got an opportunity right now as civilization, and particularly here in the United States, that we're going to be able to see freedom restored when it comes to how you want to take care of your body and what you want to do with it, and what you're going to inject into it, and what you're going to have access to. I'm very hopeful that things maybe are going to be changed a little bit right now, especially with what's happening in Washington. I'm very optimistic right now that we may see some big changes that will restore at least some level of freedom when it comes to how we take care of ourselves.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I really resonate, as you know, with permaculture. And so I resonate with like data, just like you, like how much of the United States is going towards growing food right now. And then, how do we transition away from industrial, conventional petroleum-based, farming and actually improve the fertility of soil, which in my opinion is at the foundation of nutrition.
Absolutely. We've got to restore and go back. Obviously there is a need for large scale, but unfortunately we've lost something terrible. It's really, really tragic. I mean, and this gets into a whole nother level of discussion of, what's going on with the forces of economics, and how we have been manipulated by some very powerful groups and a small selection of people who have been controlling the money system.
Yeah, well, see, I knew we would get there eventually,
No,
right?
I mean, this frightens me, and I wish I had all the answers. I don't know how you restore such a broken system.
Well, I think it's local. I mean, at least what I've learned with National Health Federation and lobbying, and from my understanding of government, and then also, this idea of the economy, because I do believe, government most of the time interferes with the economy, and then it just becomes a balance of like, who's looking out for us, corporations, the government. But what I'm saying is, about locals, like what you were saying, if you have a local rancher that and like you have a relationship, with them, a friendship, and you're able to visit where the ranch is, and you know what the cows are eating, and so on. And then it's like you're giving them your hard-earned money, and then they're giving you food that is promoting your health. And so it's kind of like the idea of people just trying to know their local government. And then, as you know, I'm in real estate. We talk a lot about real estate. That's also the challenge here because, looking at highest and best use of land and like really trying to calculate from an economic perspective how, if someone owns this land, how much money can they make, farming, but to really quantify the value, and then I can't help but look at schools, especially elementary schools in the cafeteria, and like we're talking once again, these contracts. I mean, I don't want to go all over the place, Greg, but I think about, for you, it's like what, well, sports teams, they don't always just buy Gatorade retail, they get it in bulk so they can fill up the, 5-gallon jugs with it or whatever. And then it's like, same thing with kids, like I know you have an Olaloa for kids, but how that becomes policy because there's obviously, funding for this. And then I see it as all
Well,
connected.
this is the problem: money, cost. The fact is that we don't have money. We have currency. We have paper,
Yeah.
and it's been a terrible lie to the world's population as we've basically lost the concept of real money. And so it's not that the houses are so expensive; it's the fact that you need so much paper to get into one. And I think we're at a real crossroads on many different levels right now in terms of where we're headed. We've kicked the can down the road so far. I'm frankly amazed that they've been able to hold the system together as long as they have. And there's a
More
it's what?
printing more money, right? I mean,
Well, that's unfortunately what's happening. They're stealing from us.
well, from the future, right?
Absolutely. They're inflation is theft, and we are I think at a breaking point. You know.
Yeah, and it's a whole nother talk, Greg, because
Yeah.
between nutrition and toxins and fertility, and then the next generation, and but who knows? I mean, did you hear Trump talk about a Department of External Revenue?
External, yes. I think it's important to remember the fact that for a large chunk of the history of this nation, we ran on tariffs and excise taxes, and the reality is that government is too big. Freedom is very important. I love all this talk lately about social media and censorship. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. Being able to express your ideas and have the dialogue is how we arrive at a new understanding and awareness. And I'm very, very frightened that we see our freedoms being taken away.
Yeah.
This used to be a free country. It was founded on those principles, and it's turning into a disaster as we lose our freedoms.
And I don't want to be negative, Greg, but I sometimes feel like I need to sound the alarm when it comes to X and even Facebook now, how they're trying to say they're, not censoring. But the problem is I feel like they kind of get too much information about like a resistance per se. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
Well, and then again, this is where, this is where dialogues occur. The famous argument used to be, the American Nazi Party has a right to exist. They're able to communicate their ideas as long as they're not talking about, inciting violence.
yeah,
And the idea is, I think it's better to be transparent and let people talk. And even when they're wrong, I mean, for example, we go back to Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling discovered the single helix, and then he had a theory about the so-called triple helix, which he knew was wrong. He had bad imagery, and the imagery in England was better, and that's what Crick and Watson. And so he put out a theory. He knew the theory was wrong. He expressed that in hopes that people would be able to have the dialogue and be able to have discovery. And oftentimes that's how things happen. But I don't think we have to fear it. I think people are smarter than that. Even if they get bad information, they just gotta be open to having the dialogue. I couldn't believe that people were being threatened over the over this whole COVID thing, that we couldn't have a discussion about it.
yeah.
Somebody wants to go get a vaccine. God, all right, God bless you. Go have a vaccine. I hope you're okay. But let's at least we can have a dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's how people become informed. So it's like
Absolutely
that. And then remember, the whole purpose of being informed is consent, and it's like I don't want to get too deep into this conversation because I do feel like my opinion, I mean, I'm not sure if you agree, but like when we're told about, terrorists, it's almost like something made up, to be like, if there's anything that's trying to confront the root cause of corruption, they're a terrorist. And then it's like, anybody who truly is trying to promote, freedom, that's not trying to be violent or anything, just people who have enough informed discussions to kind of get to the root cause of our societal issues, that would be considered a terrorist because they're a threat to this status quo of, control.
Well, certainly there are a lot of examples of manipulation and black swan events and governments manipulating the people. I mean, there's no question about that. At the same time, over over history, we've seen there are plenty of also bad actors too, who are, they're just some evil people that are out there. And I understand that, sometimes conflict is unavoidable. But it's very important that question everything,
Mm-hmm.
And identify what, sometimes things are not as they appear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Things are stranger than they appear.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, cool, Greg. I try to keep these around an hour long, and I know we were talking a little bit before, so I want to, respect your time. And a few times, Olaloa in the background, so people definitely, if you haven't experienced Olaloa yet, I mean, I personally can't recommend it enough. I mean, I do love it, and like I'm saying, I just, have to be at peace because there's times, when I would have a sauna. And I would be like, oh, I'm trying to measure how long can I stay in the sauna, before I feel like I have to leave. And, this time I'm drinking a Laloa, this time I'm not. And it's like, I try to be scientific like that, but then.
Like, well, what we'll do, just for your audience. Well, right after I get off here, I'll put a code together.
TruthLab. Yeah.
Just do truth.
Okay.
Use the coupon code truth and you'll save 30%. On our website if they want to try the product. And certainly if people have questions, they can always go to olaloa.com or drinkyourvitamins.com. They can always call us. I'm here, and, they can give me a call. I'm happy to talk to them. If they want to reach me directly, 415-730-4734. That goes right to my cell phone. You can talk to the big Kahuna whenever you want.
Awesome. And here
And
I'm.
like I say, I mean, I love the dynamic. We can do this again. I'm always, I can give you as much time as you want, and I'm always available for you, Alex.
Thank you. Here I'm just pulling up some NHF here. I did.
Certainly, it would be great if people, are have concerns about if they've got concerns about health freedom and want to be able to support us in our mission. We're trying to protect you so that you have access to preventive care, alternative medicine, dietary supplements. We also sit on the Codex board. We're the only health freedom organization that's there. We have a number of campaigns. We'd love to have you, at a minimum, just sign up and get on our email list for the National Health Federation. There are some forces that are out there that are trying to take away your right and access to supplements, to alternative care. They're pretty big, powerful forces, from the FDA to the FTC to the AMA to the CDC, the World Health Organization. I mean, we've seen, I think, in the last few years that there are some groups out there that don't believe that you have right to even have access to this information. And there has been tremendous censor, and a lot of good people who have great information have been attacked. And I don't think that we make a better civilization by stifling people in science. Science needs to be out in the light, and people need to be able to share information and work together to make a healthy population. So join the NHF. Just go to the nhf.com and you can learn more about us there.
Are you going to be presenting, Greg, in March in Dallas?
Well, at Dallas, I will be there. We're going to have a booth there. I haven't discussed anything about actually doing a presentation, but maybe I'll do something on methylation while we're there and express to people how important methylation is and how it all works.
Yeah.
To an extent. I mean, methylation, you could spend a lifetime trying to understand methylation. It's incredible. But we've just tried to make it very easy for people because, what I've learned is that people don't want to really struggle. They don't want to take a lot of pills. And I've tried to make it as easy as possible for people.
Yeah. Well, you've done a good job, Greg. And it's like the challenge always is to convert a complex field of study into layman terms, and so.
Yeah. But, I think we've done that. I think we've pretty much done that. And in fact, what people should probably do is, if they can, they should go onto our homepage. There's a link there that goes into explaining a little bit more of the details of methylation. And those 2 pages, I think, will give people a lot of information.
Yeah. Yep. So olaloa.com, the nhf.com. Thank you so much, Greg, for your time.
It's great to be here with you, Alex.
Yeah.
Anytime.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to the Truth Lab, episode number 12. Have a great rest of your day.
Peace. Aloha, everybody.